Laramai, good morning. This is Judith Lay welcoming you to Manx Radio and to the podcast of this week's edition of At Your Service. Manx Radio! Today's programme is all about changed plans. Cardinal Michael Fitzgerald was planning to travel to the island from his home in Liverpool to celebrate the confirmation of young people in the Roman Catholic churches in Ramsey, Douglas and Port Erin. But his visit was cancelled when he became ill a couple of days ago. He'd also planned to be a guest on today's programme and to speak at an ecumenical service in Onken this evening. But above all this, of course, our thoughts and prayers go to the Cardinal for a speedy return to full health and hopefully, in the not-too-distant future, another visit to the island. Something else that's been cancelled in consideration of the COVID situation is the island's commemoration of National Holocaust Memorial Day, which was planned for this afternoon in St Mary's Catholic Church here in Douglas, and at which it was planned that Cardinal Michael would give the address. So today's programme is an attempt to capture a memorial we must never ever forget, and a meeting with a leading churchman with a delightfully down-to-earth approach to a distinguished career. Well, music is usually where we start each week, so let's enjoy the hymn selected for this year's Holocaust Memorial Service. All people that on earth do dwell, sing to the Lord with cheerful voice. The theme for this year's Holocaust Memorial is One Day, signifying that life for so many Holocaust victims changed fatally in just one single day. Carol Jempson is a leading member of the island's Jewish community, and last week she explored this theme through a series of 5 podcasts, sharing the stories and experiences of real people who've lived through genocide around the world. In Carol's own words,
"We put aside the 27th of January as the one day to come together to remember, to learn about the Holocaust, Nazi persecution and the genocides that followed in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur, in the hope that maybe one day in the future there will be no genocide. We learn more about the past, we empathise with others today, and we hope that people will take action for a better future."
Thank you, Carol Jempson, and the whole series of 5 podcasts specially produced for this year's Holocaust Memorial Day are all available to listen at manxradio.com. Just click on the podcast tab on the homepage and you'll find them under the Island Life Special Series. A person telling their own story is always much more moving than any written account or a third person repeating their words, and so it's vitally important that recordings are made whilst Holocaust survivors are able to share their experiences. We're going to hear now from people in their 90s, and we might well wonder how they can recall so clearly what happened to them as very young people. Perhaps it's because their experiences were so dreadful that it would be impossible to ever forget. I feel I should warn you that these stories contain details which you might find particularly distressing. This is Rachel Levy describing her childhood growing up in a small village at the foot of the Carpathian Mountains.
I'm Rachel. We had a pretty village, a river running through. In the summer we were swimming in the river, and the winter was iced over and we would skate over it. We were a happy village and very small, about 100 Jewish families, surrounded by mountains, lots of other people living around the mountains who used to come down to the village to buy things. We were not allowed to do lots of things, but at the same time they wanted the youth, the young men mainly, and eventually they took the young men out of the village. And my father was still a young man. He was included. They also restricted us from going to school. We had no schooling. We had religious education, but no school. Jewish kids were not allowed to go to school. We were told, and this was not by radio, we didn't have radios, but by word of mouth, people traveling from one place to the other, that they said they were going to come to empty our village because lots of people had been taken to ghettos already. And our very good friends in the mountains said they would hide us, and they did hide us. That was the first time. And the soldiers left and they didn't find us. And we came back to the village and life went on for a little while. But around Easter time, they came back. And although we were hidden again, the people had to give us up because they were threatened. They threatened they would be killed if they didn't give up the Jews. So they gave up. They said, you've got to come out of hiding. And all of us came out to the village and they took us away. We didn't take much with us, we couldn't. We walked to the ghetto. I don't know how far it was, I can't remember that. And the ghetto was full of people. And there was no food, only what we carried with us. And it was very difficult for all of us to go on the trucks and travel somewhere. Again, we didn't know where, at least children didn't know. The carriages were full, just standing only. There were no seats, there was no sanitation, there was no water. All the children were screaming and crying, and we hung around my mother. Everybody was upset, but there was nothing the adults could do. They had no way of helping us. I saw my brother and I was with him when they took us to somewhere which happened to be Auschwitz. We were taken into places where they shaved our heads. They took our clothes. They gave us other clothes, uniforms. And that was when they took us into the camps. And we were put into a barrack with the tiered the beds of boards, just boards. And that's where we were. I had people I knew. One of them was my mother's sister, a young woman. She was about 20, 21. And there were some cousins there, and we did nothing. We just get taken out in the morning to be counted, get back to the camp and to the block, given soup and some brick-style bread, and that had to last. And that's all the food we got, this gritty, watery soup. We could see men in the next camp, but I didn't see my brother. Never saw my brother. And then it was our turn, and we were marched out of the camp, and we didn't know where we were going. And it took days and nights and cold. It was autumn, it was cold, we were scantily dressed, we had no proper shoes or walking boots. We walked without food. Even the guards were starving by this time. I think they were being neglected. We marched for days and nights and days and nights. And then we found that we were in Belsen. And there I found my mother's sister. She was there, but she wasn't well by then. She died, and they threw her on the heap. I was left very weak. We were all weak. We had nothing. The guards had given up. There was no kitchen. There was nobody there. And we were just abandoned, really. And then a week after my aunt died, she died a week before liberation. And she didn't see the soldiers coming in, and we were liberated by the British. They looked after us, the nurses. Some people had to have their hair cut off again because we'd had grown hair by then. And some people, they just sat and deloused us. They used their combs and they used everything they could to save us having our hair cut. They were excellent looking after us, and they got us to some sort of humans, looking again like humans.
It was in Auschwitz that over 1 million people, mostly Jews, were killed during World War II. Vladimir Monk survived Auschwitz and lives now in upstate New York, where local radio reporter Emily Russell went to visit and talk with him.
Monk is a small guy. He's got a gray goatee, and when he smiles, you can see it in his eyes. We sit down at his kitchen table, and he starts his story from the beginning.
I was born in 1925.
Monk grew up in Pardubice. It's a small city east of Prague. He was a teenager when the Nazis invaded Czechoslovakia. A few years into that occupation, Monk's family was forced onto a train and sent to a concentration camp called Terezin.
Terezin was originally a military city, so it was just naturally closed. Once you are in, you couldn't get out.
When you went there, what did you think was happening?
For me, it was an adventure.
Remember, for most of his teenage years, Monk lived under strict Nazi occupation. At the time, most Jews and much of the world didn't know what was coming, that the Nazis were building gas chambers that would eventually kill thousands of people at a time. After 2 years at Terezin, Monk and his father were put on another train. He says they didn't know where they were going until they got there.
And I saw through the window Auschwitz-Birkenau.
He got off the train and got in line. Nazi soldiers told Monk to go one way and his father the other. Later on, Monk asked his neighbor at Auschwitz about that moment.
What happened to him, do you know? You see the smoke over there? He went up the chimney. You never died in Auschwitz. You went up the chimney.
His mother, Monk later learned, met the same fate. Just a few months later, the Soviets liberated Auschwitz. It was January 27th, 1945. Monk says he tries not to think too much about that time.
They are people, their life practically ended with concentration camp. They are survivors, but they never got over it. Yeah, I am a survivor, but I try to live normal life.
Monk went back to school. He got a PhD, and he got married to a woman he met in the Terezin camp. They didn't talk to their kids about the Holocaust until they were older. He says he didn't want the experience to define their family. Monk is retired now. His wife died a few years ago. The Holocaust is a painful part of his family legacy. He didn't have any siblings, but Monk did have a lot of aunts and uncles and cousins.
They all perished in the concentration camp. So for me, it's like going to the family cemetery.
Monk closes his eyes and shudders at the thought.
In 1941, 11-year-old Philip Lazowski and his family were among the Jews driven out of their village in Poland by the Nazis and forced to live in a ghetto. In the ghetto, Philip was separated from his family. It was then that he saw the Nazis sending children and the elderly to their death. But he also noticed that they were sparing families with adults who worked, like doctors, tailors and shoe repairers. Philip is now aged 91 and is a rabbi. Here, with a little help from his 86-year-old wife, Ruth, Philip tells how a bit of quick thinking saved his life.
I saw a woman standing with two girls, and she was a nurse. So I went over to her and I asked her, "Would you be kind enough to take me as your son?" She said, "If they let me live with two children, maybe they let me live with three. Hold on to my dress." We survived. And even though I saw her only for 15, 20 minutes, I never forgot her face. I was able to come to the United States in 1947. I was 17 years old.
Can you describe life after that?
Years later, a fellow got married, and I didn't want to go to the wedding. I didn't have fancy clothes. Also, I don't dance. But I went and sitting on the table, I said, "I come from the town of Belica." A lady was sitting next to me. She said, "You know, a girlfriend told me a story. They saved a boy from Belica, and we don't know if he's alive." When she finished telling me the story, I realized that I am the boy. I says, "Where do they live?" And I called the lady that saved me. And I promised to come to visit her. While there, I noticed the two girls. They were 18, 19 years old and growing up.
That was me. I was that girl.
Yes. Your mother saved my life. I then married you, and that's how our family began. We have been together as husband and wife for 66 years. We had 3 children, 7 grandchildren. All in all, I am very thankful to be alive. God was good to us.
The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning, new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness, O Lord. Great is thy faithfulness.
The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning, new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness, O Lord. Great is thy faithfulness. They are new every morning, new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness, O Lord. Great is thy faithfulness.
Catholic Cardinal Michael Fitzgerald had planned to visit the island this weekend. His visit had to be cancelled at the last moment due to illness, but some material from a conversation recorded last year between Cardinal Fitzgerald and Father Damian Howard, leader of the British Jesuits, gives us some insights into a quite exceptional churchman. From a very young age, Michael Fitzgerald knew he wanted to be a priest, but not just a priest, a missionary priest.
I think that was due to the lady who was teaching me catechism, because I wasn't at a Catholic school, so this lady Catholic teacher from the local parish school would come every Monday evening to teach me catechism, prepare me for First Communion, etc. And she eventually gave me some books, the WOPSI books. WOPSI is the guardian angel of a missionary. The books written by an English white father. And I was fascinated by these, and great stories about witch doctors and lions and all sorts of things, cars breaking down and money coming in at unexpected times. And so I remember buying a little CTS pamphlet about missions and starting reading this, and it was all about celebrating Mass in pubs in East Anglia. And I said, that's not what I want. And rejected that completely.
And so, at the age of just 12, and at his own request, this determined young boy entered the junior seminary and began his priestly training with the Missionaries of Africa, known also as the White Fathers. He studied philosophy in Ireland and England, theology in the Netherlands and Tunisia, and it was there that he began learning Arabic and acquiring some knowledge of Islam. After his ordination, Father Michael continued to study, this time in Rome, then to study and teach, first in Uganda, where he also taught courses on Islam to Muslim as well as to Christian students. In the years that followed, and by now fluent in Arabic, his ministry in the Middle East and his work in the Vatican has made Cardinal Michael Fitzgerald one of the Church's leading experts on Islam, Christian-Muslim relations and interreligious dialogue. Pope John Paul II made Father Michael first a bishop and some years later an archbishop, the rank that he held in 2012 when he resigned after some years as the Pope's ambassador to Egypt and a delegate to the Arab League. After Egypt, and now in retirement, Archbishop Michael remained with his order, the Missionaries of Africa, the White Fathers, at their house in Jerusalem. He stayed there till early 2019, when he returned to England and now works as an assistant priest in an inner-city parish in Liverpool. In September 2019, Pope Francis announced that Archbishop Michael Fitzgerald was to be raised to the rank of cardinal. And in January this year, in the New Year's Honours List, he was appointed OBE for services to interfaith and interchurch partnerships. When asked if, as a 12-year-old wanting to be a missionary priest, his life had worked out as he imagined it would, the Cardinal's reply gives an insight into not only the breadth of his ministry, but how his experiences have shaped his thinking.
It certainly wasn't what I expected. It has taken me in many different parts of the world, not only in Africa, but also in Asia, in traveling in India, in Japan, in the Philippines, Indonesia, Pakistan. There are places where I haven't been yet, but there was one very interesting thing that I was able to do. It was before I became a bishop, so that was good. I don't think that I'd have been able to do it as a bishop. It was to join a group of monks and nuns from Europe in an exchange program with Buddhists in Japan. So we spent a month in Japan, and we spent part of that time living in a Buddhist monastery and living like the monks in the monastery, doing what they did. That was fascinating. You know, you learn from the inside rather than from just reading about it. And really, the Buddhist monasteries in Japan are like novitiates. The Buddhist monks, they become bonzes, they become parish priests, if you like, and they have their own temples. which often pass from father to son because they were made to marry. They're not celibate. They're celibate during their training, but not afterwards. So we were meditating together with these young novices, and the silence was incredible. The depth of the silence there was really, really something to experience. Well, the grace of God is working there, for sure. We would give different explanations. They wouldn't say what we would say. We would say the Holy Spirit is at work. They wouldn't say that at all. But I think that the reality is there. That was a great experience. Of course, you learn from reading what other people write, but you learn also from being in places and seeing people. And I took a holiday in India once with a friend, a religious sister, and we just, sat in temples and watched people and puja and see the devotion of people. And down near the Ganges as well, seeing people bathing in the Ganges and burying a small child in the water, how they did that. These things remain in my mind as approaches to people. One would hope that people of other religions could have a similar approach to us sometimes, that they would just be there when we are praying and try to appreciate what we're doing.
The voice of Cardinal Michael Fitzgerald, OBE, a white father living and working in Liverpool now, and we send our prayers to the Cardinal for a return to full health. And we finish now with a look at our notice board. Bride Wesley Guild invite you to a concert by Musicale in Bride Methodist Schoolroom tomorrow, Monday, at 8 o'clock. It'll be followed by light refreshments, and everyone is warmly welcomed. St Thomas's Church in Finch Road, here in the heart of Douglas, is famous for its hospitality, and after a break caused by COVID restrictions, it all restarts this week. So, on Friday the 4th, pop into St Thomas's for coffee and a chat from 10:30 onwards. Then from noon until 1:30, Friday lunch will be served at St Thomas's. Then next Sunday morning, that's the 6th, why not come to St Thomas's for Sunday brunch? It'll be served at 9:30 and you're welcome to stay on for the family service that follows at 11 a.m. Sulby Methodist Church are offering food on Friday too. A hot lunch will be served in the church at noon. Booking is needed, please, and you can do this by phoning Ruth on 897 364. 897 364. On to next Saturday the 5th, and it's the monthly craft market at Glenmay Chapel and Community Centre. It's open from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m, selling homemade produce and handicrafts by local artists. Crafts, gifts, knitwear, jewellery, artwork, and so much more. Entry's free, and there'll be homemade light lunches, those famous bacon baps, hot drinks, and homemade cakes. And if you're not sure where Glenmay Chapel is, just head for the village and look for the bunting and the banners. Also next Saturday, Bride Methodist Chapel have a coffee morning in Ramsey Town Hall, starting at 10 a.m. On now to next Sunday, February the 6th, and Maloo Church have a special service to celebrate Candlemas and the anniversary of the accession of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II to the throne on the 6th of February 1952. The special service in Maloo Church is at 3 o'clock next Sunday afternoon and will be a shortened family service led by Reverend Peter Upton-Jones, and it'll include a performance by the Perrybane Dancers, with refreshments after the service and a warm welcome for all. And that's all that we've time for now. But I'll be back later, so do please join me if you can tonight at 9 o'clock for Sundown, a rich mix of easy listening music to round off your weekend. And do please email me if you've got items for the notice board or you'd like to request a favourite hymn to be included in a future programme. My email address is judithlay@manxradio.com. So till whenever we meet again, this is Judith saying thank you for listening, and I wish you and those you love a blessed and peaceful week and a very good morning.
The Nation Station, Manx